You've covered Penn State for years. You've been obviously hyper involved recently with some numbers and figures. The one thing that Brandon and I have talked about, and we've shared about this, like part of us launching State Media has been, providing a platform for former lettermen to give their state of the program, their input, their insights, experiences, whatever, for anybody listening, because I think it's really unique. And if you see, this may be something, the shift in consumption, the consumption model across, ESPN and all the major networks is former players, because they have a unique perspective that not a lot of folks can give, and fans really want to hear that. So that's part of the reason why we're doing this. But then also for you, like, I wanted to bring you in here because of everything we just highlighted. But when you look at this season, we've brought up a lot of points that we felt were expectations were here, sometimes weren't quite met, like covering the team and seeing the weekly press conferences and things like that, like the temperature, because I really don't think that any of the issues that we have as a program right now are personnel issues like we were dealing with when we were at school in terms of the sanctions and trying to rebuild a roster. Like even the coaching staff issues, the carousel, like that's one thing, but there's been a lot of consistency in terms of what Coach Franklin wanted. So like overall this season, like I'm not going to ask you to say like failure or not or whatever, but what was your feeling covering the team from week 1 all the way until the Peach Bowl? And then we're going to kind of shift that into, projections, because we are solution-based folks here, and we want to see what your thoughts may be, and heading into 2024, what this team needs to do to ultimately compete in a beefed-up Big Ten conference.
I do like that solutions, and let me give you a little shout-out. Very, very. I mean, I'm a purveyor, as we talked about maybe before you went on the air. I'm a purveyor of you guys talking. I learn a lot from you. Same thing with Dawkins, and I guess he's State Media too. Same thing with his podcast. I mean, it can be an outside person, me looking at it, but learning from your perspective and learning from Nick's perspective and Jerry's and somewhat of Aeneas's, I've learned a lot. I've been around my first class at Penn State was with was an English class with Jeff Hostetler and Danny Rocco. So that's how far I go back. And he turned out to be a pretty good quarterback. And, Danny's a great coach. This past season, the defense was NFL quality. They had a mentality, man. I mean, they had a mentality on and off the field, and everything they did, they felt it, they walked it, they talked it. Every piece I saw, we could go to practice. That's who those guys were. That was not the offense personality. And for all his pluses and minuses, I think if Drew had kicked some ass and taken some names early, that mentality would have served them well against Ohio State and Michigan. Like, I heard you guys talk about it maybe a couple of weeks ago. It's like you got to go in there and think you're good enough. You got to go in there and think you're going to compete and you can win. Defense certainly thought that. I'm not sure everybody in offense thought that. And that's a mental thing. That's not a schematic thing. Right. And I think it manifests itself a little bit in a schematic thing in the way that Yursich called the offense. It was like, we're going to play on this side of the field, and we're not going to be really super sophisticated because we may not be. So, I think it's that chip on the shoulder. It's that chip on the shoulder thing. It's like, was it the Rose Bowl, B. Bell, when you were hurt and you were still in there fighting? Or Christian, it's you like that last drive against Michigan, like you guys manifested it. You lived it. And if there's one thing about Penn State overall, I think that's what was missing on the offensive side of the ball. And for whatever reason, the defense couldn't will that to happen on the offensive side. So I don't know what transpired in the locker room, but they looked and played and acted like two different teams.
That seems to be an overwhelming theme over the last, we always talk about, I said from week 1 is confidence and young kids college football team can go a long way. I'm going to say it probably every episode for as long as this podcast goes. And to hear that from you, as you said, you listen to our perspective, but you can see that you kind of notice the same thing. And I think that's I'm not going to say it's a bright side, but it's something that could easily be can be developed, I'll say. And as Hack always says, it's not a personnel thing. It's not too much schematics. It all has to be everyone on that same accord that you're talking about. It can't be two split teams, as you said, different mindsets. So interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, the way Ole Miss, and I didn't go to the game. I was coming off surgery. I didn't go to the game, but it's you could just tell the way that Ole Miss carried themselves, right? Yeah. And even Kiffin, I got to tell you, I love Kiffin, man. How about when that guy left and he had to tweet about catch and release? Freaking attitude I want from my coach. Okay, you were here, but we're going to let you go. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that resonates with kids who are 18 to 21. You go, that's my coach, man. That's my guy.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what I think is going to be really unique. You know, me having left early and watching Joe Moorhead, I keep going back to that, but I thought that season, that offense had that mentality that you're talking about. And then even when Ricky took back over, and I love Ricky Ronnie more than most people can even imagine. You still saw some moments where it was again, I always compare it to you go in there, if I'm going in there to compete, I'm emptying the clip. And if it's not, if the results don't come to my favor, at least I can say I left everything out there and I didn't hold my cards. I let it all, I shoved all in multiple times. And I thought, you watched Washington last night. Washington did that. I mean, they were up against a superior defense. You know, they had probably one of the best players on the field in Michael Penix Jr., and he shot his shot, and it just didn't quite work out for him. But I respect and commend guys and teams that come in and say, this is who we are. We're going to do this. We believe we can win this game. And at the end of the day, if the result doesn't fall in our favor, we'll move on and figure it out. And I think that's a lot easier of a pill to swallow. And I think when you see the different camps of Penn State fans now, you have the one camp that's oh, we're never going to get there. We got to move on. You have the other camp that's oh, we need patience. We need patience. We're going to continue to fighting this thing. And it's at the end of the day, I think it ultimately comes down to something, like you said, B-Bell, is very correctable. And I'm really interested about this off season. You know, we have some stuff going on in the portal, adding some key pieces, but I think the expectations are going to be tempered comparatively speaking to what was even coming into this year. And that is a very unique opportunity if leveraged properly in that building. And those are it's almost nothing to do with football now, and it's more of the mental side and the psyche. And Andy Koltanecki coming in here, and how can he establish himself within that offense and get them going? That's going to be the key to 2024 to me. It's not the Jimmies and Joes. It's how can we develop a killer mentality on that side of the ball and attack, as opposed to being the guys that have to play defense on the offensive side and be oh, they do this really well, so we're afraid of that. No, we're going here and this is what we're going to do. And again, live with the results. So